Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And I'm Argy.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where we impersonate Steve Jobs, because this week we watched Rosa.
Written by Malorie, Blackman, and Chris Chibnall.
Directed by Mark Tonderai.
And aired on October 21st, 2018.
Now, I'm going to just say a little bit about Malorie Blackman. So primarily she has been a children and young adults author. She's also part of a movement called Let Books Be Books, which is trying to say that books shouldn't be targeted at young girls or young boys, particularly with things like cover art. So just let the books be about what they're about and let whoever read them who wants to read them. She's interesting. She is British. She is a woman of colour. She's also written some books to do with racism called Noughts and Crosses. Originally, they couldn't figure out how to release them in the US, but they worked it out. And if you want to get any of them, they are under a different title, which is the Black and White series. So you can look for them there. Malorie's also an appointed Officer of the Order of the British Empire, which is often shortened to OBE. She was given that in 2008. And in June 2013, she was announced as the Children's Laureate. What that is, it's a position that's initially awarded in the United Kingdom once every 2 years to a writer or illustrator of children's books to celebrate outstanding achievement in the field. People have probably heard more of poet laureates. They're sort of almost known as the official poet or the official children's author to the Crown. So what they say carries a lot of weight. So she's been a very successful author, and I liked what she did with this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know any of that, but I'm not. but no, I'm not surprised that she has, sort of this. I guess you could say like illustrious kind of background, because this is the first, I think, 13th Doctor episode that I really liked. I really enjoyed this episode.
I'm going to say I think this is the best episode of Series 11.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree.
I don't want to say the others are worse, but I don't think any of them are better than this. It's a pretty high bar, though. I mean, I was thinking about this last night. You watch the episode and you enjoy it casually, and then when you go back and watch it for something like this, things just have a different perspective. And the thing I noticed was the dialogue. My goodness, each character has their own distinct voice. Each has something interesting to say. And some of the Doctor's lines are absolutely beautiful in this, really sharp, snappy. You get an idea of the sort of scrappy nature of her, that she doesn't take things too seriously, except when she needs to. And I just thought that was – and the pacing is – sorry, I'm going to rave about this for a second. The pacing of the episode is absolutely brilliant. There's no down spots in it. Even the exposition is handled really well. You get a real feeling for who Rosa is, which I really like. We keep meeting her in different situations, and the way she conducts herself, you're just on her side straight away.
Definitely. And I kind of want to speak to one thing you mentioned is like the pacing and stuff. And obviously they've changed the format. We have these 50-minute episodes now. And this was one where like I was really enjoying it, and I checked the timestamp because I thought there wasn't much left, and I was like, oh sweet, there's like 30 minutes left. And I just thought like I was engaged for all of that. Like that wasn't like, oh, there's 30 minutes left. That was like, yes, there's 30 more minutes of this, and this is great, and I want to watch all of this.
Yeah, I could see that. Before we go any further, I just would really like to acknowledge that I am not American and I am not a person of colour. So I will be bringing a different perspective to this than a lot of other people might have who grew up in America or who grew up not being white. So I apologise if I say anything offensive, and I'm more than happy for people to put little messages on the Trust Your Doctor Facebook or Twitter feed to correct anything that I say, and I would welcome that, because I always want to learn. And the other thing I want to do is, before we go anywhere else, is I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm in today, which is known as Australia. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. They hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across the nation. So yes, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land.
Cool. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
thanks.
I mean, we're both also not people of color. So we should acknowledge that as well, although I think we've mentioned it many times on this show that we're two white, straight males doing a Doctor Who podcast in a group of white, straight males doing Doctor Who podcasts.
It's very refreshing, I think, to finally have two white cisgendered blokes doing a Doctor Who podcast. It was about time.
Yeah, really. The genre was just aching for
Trust your doctor.
Trust your doctor to appear out of the nebulous wasteland and answer people's calls. So.
Well, we are who we're born to be, aren't we? So sometimes we just have to do what we can with what we got. This is what we're doing today.
Well, since we're on the topic, I should just mention that, I am American, born and raised here in the U.S. of A.
That's really a good point. I'm not American.
And
the nation rests upon your shoulders.
And I'm probably going to embarrass the hell out of myself with how little I know about Rosa Parks and the civil rights movement in general.
I'm going to be basically drawing entirely on my high school history class for all of this. So,
we did some American history when I was in. I think our school is a bit different, but I think you'd call it middle school. We did a little bit, but we were mostly focusing on the Civil War. We didn't really focus on the Jim Crow laws or anything like that. So most of the stuff I've learned from going to museums in America when I visited over there. So my grasp of what's going on here is going to be very basic. So we will muddle through.
We have watched an incredible amount of historicals where my knowledge of the subject at hand has been practically non-existent. Let's look at something like the massacre. Never going to let the show live the massacre down, I'll be honest.
Gee, wouldn't it be interesting if they did some programs involving Indigenous Americans? Oh, that would be fascinating.
That would be interesting, but...
Well, we have the Aztecs.
We have the Aztecs.
Yeah. Not late enough, I think, to sort of deal with, people being wiped out.
No. Definitely pre-Columbian. I think, now that I say that.
I think the Aztecs was pre-Columbian. The episode, I think, was pre-Columbian.
Yeah.
Or the serial, I should say.
I mean, a lot of people don't realise this, but we had a lot of Indigenous massacres in Australia. People usually know about Tasmania, which is the bit off the bottom, little island off on its own, off the bottom of Australia. But we've had massacres all over Australia. It's been quite disgusting. And a lot of white people still don't realise how many Indigenous people we massacred. Yeah.
That's okay. We have white people who like to just forget we even massacred them in the first place. And by we, I mean you guys, the Americans.
Yeah.
Not to say that South Africa didn't have its own set of problems, but...
Well, see, it was interesting. They filmed Ghost Monument in South Africa, and because they wanted to get that desert feel, and they thought, well, while we're here, what else can we shoot? And of course, South Africa still has a lot of the old whites only signs up, so they were able to go and get that great shot at the hotel because that's just existing. Sorry, I should make clear the whites only policies are not existing now, but some of the old signage is still up. So that's why they decided to shoot this in South Africa as well.
Right. And I don't know, I was just kind of skimming, but I read that did they go to Alabama actually, or?
I want to say no. I want to say the entirety of this episode was filmed in South Africa
okay.
based on what I know.
Yeah, I was just kind of skimming, so I wasn't 100% on that.
Because I'm pretty sure I read that Mark Tonderai, both his episodes this season, as part of the same production block, were both filmed in South Africa. So
yeah,
right.
That was my understanding.
It's I didn't recognize any of the places they used in this episode for filming, but then again, my knowledge of South Africa is limited to my once every 5 years visit and everything before I was 7. So,
I mean, they've done really well with that location of the pub, because that looks so much like a house out of New Orleans, or New Orleans, I think you say. They've done their scouting work really well, I think. Everything looks like it should.
Right.
Well, everything, I should also mention, sounds like it should, because we get some actual good American accents in Doctor Who for once.
I really thought you were going to say some good music for once. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this because I've heard that people say Vinette Robinson did a shocking job.
Yeah, no, I think
all very good.
Even the just bit part, minor characters in this, I think, sound really good. In a show
so she does sound quite American?
I mean, yeah, I would say so.
I haven't been to Alabama, so...
No, yeah.
Well, I know she's not doing her R's, which I associate more with Boston.
Yeah, no, they do it in the South as well.
Okay.
From my understanding, I know a couple of people from like West Virginia and Tennessee and Florida, which are all pretty close, and yeah, it's similar.
Now, interesting thing about her. I've been just jumping around watching some Doctor Who lately, just as takes my fancy, and I watched 42 the other night, and I went, "Hang on a second, that's Vinette Robinson."
Right. And
so she played Abby Lerner in 42, and guess who 42 is written by?
Good old Chris Chibbers.
so this is where she must have, come up on his radar, and he's gone, "Oh, she's good. Might use her again."
Definitely. And it seems like every episode she's in is just great, because I love 42 personally.
We both liked 42, which is just like contrary to a lot of fandom. Another one of those classic Trust Your Doctor contrary to fandom opinions we're known for.
Well, to be honest, I love it too. So I think some people don't tend to like episodes with Martha in. Personally, I think Martha's a terrific character.
Martha was awesome.
But yeah, she's a polarizing character, unfortunately.
Only by the people who love Rose.
What was that?
I was going to say, only for the people who love Rose. I feel like people who think Rose is the greatest companion of all time don't like Martha, and then vice versa. I feel like there's a very, very slim but existent subset of people who enjoy both.
I think the problem with Martha for a lot of people is that this whole thing of she falls in love with the Doctor straight away and this unrequited business, and I think it doesn't actually treat the character with a lot of respect.
That's fair.
Because
I think
you could imagine a character like her going, "This is not going anywhere, just get over it, here's your friend." Because we've all had to do that at one time or another. We've had a crush on somebody, they're not interested, and you just go, well, that's life.
Say la vie.
I have. So I'm going to just say a few little historical things here. Rosa was a seamstress in a department store. That's correct. She was not the first black woman to refuse to move from her bus seat. That was actually Claudette Colvin. She'd done the same thing 9 months earlier, and in fact, other women had also done similar things before Rosa. However, the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, believed that Rosa was the best candidate for seeing through a court challenge after her arrest for civil disobedience. So she violated the Alabama segregation laws. Parks' prominence in the community and her willingness to become a controversial figure inspired the black community to boycott the Montgomery buses for over a year. And it was the boycott, not her sit down, that actually changed things. Her sit down, in other words, was the spark of the movement, but it was extremely deliberate. So they sometimes make it seem like, oh, she was just tired and she didn't want to get up. Whereas now I was trying to find out where I read this. Apologies to people if I've gotten this incorrect. But I believe it was actually planned in advance, and other people were also supposed to not get up and they lost their nerve. But Rosa didn't lose her nerve and stayed seated.
I've heard something to that effect.
I was going to say I've heard something to that effect, but I don't remember the validity nor where I heard it from, but I have heard something to that effect.
And yeah,
it's December 1st was 1955 was when this event happened that we're looking at here.
Right. And definitely definitely, like, thanks for bringing that up. That's something I wanted to actually, like, give a shout out to this episode for doing as well, is that there's this huge misconception that Rosa Parks was, one, like, elderly, and two, like, very tired and didn't want to get up. That's like a narrative that's been formed around this for whatever reason. It's not historical. That's not historical in any way. And this episode does its best to deny all of that.
Well, it's interesting that Rosa does, had said a lot. Oh, yeah, everyone thought I was really old. I was only in my 40s.
Right. I mean, I think she died in 2005. So just that is like,
recently.
if she was if she was old, like how old was she? No, she was in her 40s.
I just want to try to find, because I got a quote with her talking about being tired. No, I'm not going to be able to find it. That's all right. I'll come across it later.
Well, as I say, this episode also does a good job of reinforcing the point that it's the subsequent bus boycott that really ends up not bringing down segregation, or Jim Crow, but bringing down the segregation of the bus line at the very least, and that Rosa Parks herself was just essentially a chosen figure in this fight, and she was the one who started it, but it wasn't like her act of sitting down when they were like, okay, segregation on the bus line is over. It took a substantial amount of time after that before anything like actually came of it.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't say a long time. It was only a year. And I would certainly say that the bus segregation toppling was the first domino of starting to get rid of Jim Crow. But as we know, there are still problems in the US with how coloured people are treated, particularly by the cops. So there's still a long way to go.
I mean, it's definitely like 1 year is like definitely a long time, given that they had like the Civil War ended pre-1900 and all of this racism was still existent in 1955. Just to wait yet another year was like that's a long time.
Yeah, I get your point. That's true. And just interestingly too, with the bus, name's gone from me.
The bus driver?
So with the boycott, they expected to get about 50% of people joining in with the boycotts, and they got 99%.
Yeah.
Wow.
So people walked to work, rode their bikes, did carpools, and the bus company suffered thousands of dollars in lost revenue. And then on November 23, 1956, Supreme Court ruled that segregated busing was unconstitutional.
Yeah, the bus boycott was like really a big win for Martin Luther King Jr. in a way that he was very much pro-civil disobedience in order to effect change, whereas Malcolm X at the time was very like, we need to take to the streets and riot. And the bus boycott succeeded, like being such a big success and forcing the Supreme Court to get involved was like a very big win for his point of view, where he was like, see, this is like actually causing change, even if it's maybe not as quick as we would like.
It's funny how watching this episode, you actually feel like you're seeing history unfold. I thought that was clever too. And it just sends tingles up and down my spine every time I watch it. I go, oh, this is the start of something really momentous. Just before we move on, I can't understand why they keep calling him Martin Luther King and leaving off the junior. What is that about?
Maybe it's just that the Martin Luther King Sr. is not as big of a figure. That's what my guess would be. I don't really know.
I don't think Martin Luther King Sr. even like charted on the, at least in comparison to Junior, like was as big a figure. It might just be a simplification that none of them ever met Martin Luther King Sr. so that they just know Junior as Martin Luther King.
I just found it really jarring. I kept thinking, that's not his name. You know, his name is Martin Luther King Jr. Let's call him as he was named. But, I think they shortcut it, or maybe they just call him Martin Luther King in the UK. Not sure. Another quick thing I should have said earlier too is that if you do like Vinette Robinson, she is also in Black Mirror in the episode Hated in the Nation. And she's great in that too.
Yeah, that's a show that
she's only a small part in that.
That's a show that people have recommended to me nonstop, and I've never followed anyone's advice who's recommended it to me and watched it.
Oh, so good! And if you do like that one, then Years and Years is the other great one. Yeah.
More to the list for another.
Also, I was going to say, so we have a new opening for Doctor Who at the moment, and it's actually grown on me. And to me, it feels like kind of an update of the very first opening, which was supposed to be showing the TARDIS going through its little time travel thing. And I really like the new logo, and to me it's just freshened everything up. It took me a while to get used to no cold open, but now I actually like it because the story gets to unfold without interruption and the writers aren't forced to come up with a stupid cliffhanger. So, yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan as well. I think Dylan is sort of the odd one out here.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of
I don't like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really like the theme. I think I mean, I mentioned this on the Ghost Monument episode, but you obviously haven't heard that. But basically, my thought process is there's no, like, it doesn't feel like Sagan,
yeah, that's how he said his name, I believe. In that,
Akinola actually did any work on the theme. He just took Murray Gold's bass line and added Delia Derbyshire's melody and called it a day. Like, it doesn't feel to me like there's any of his own flair. It doesn't feel like there's any flair related to the program. And then I feel like the intro is just, like, kind of lazy in that they did just redo the first Doctor's intro, which I think it's a very nice visual update, but because I feel like it almost would have fit better with last season, which was very much a throwback to the classic show. I feel like this season there hasn't been really anything that really connects this to the first 18 seasons of the show. Like, I haven't felt very connected to the classic show in any part here except for the theme and the opening. So it feels very out of place in my opinion. It's definitely
nowhere near as good as last season's, which I think is the best. Yeah, it's better than Doctor Who #7 with the wink.
Yeah.
Which I think is the worst. Winking. So that's not really saying much. But yeah, I could see that people might go, it's a bit like boring.
I mean, I don't think it has to be like bombastic or over the top or anything. Like, you can have a very cut and dry intro. I just feel like it not necessarily boring, but lazy.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite of all time is the first one, the very first one. So this throwback is just great.
But it was also your first one, so you are a little bit biased.
What's my favorite? No, I think Capaldi's. I like this episode doing the day in 1943 where Parks boarded the bus and had an altercation with James F. Blake. And he told her to enter the bus again from the back door. And then when he went around, she drove off. That actually happened with this actual same guy.
Right.
And it's nice because it sets the scene. Because she actually said after that she was going to try to never catch the bus again when he was driving. But obviously she must have come out of work quite late on the 1955 when she did catch it again.
Well, this episode actually kind of provides a little in Doctor Who universe explanation for that if she was distracted by the Doctor and she didn't notice that it was Blake.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, because I think when she enters the bus that second time, she's kind of looking at the Doctor and she's like, "What are you doing here? Like, I keep running into you," and then she doesn't see that it's Blake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually had no idea that this event in 1943 happened, and maybe I shouldn't even be admitting this, but I didn't even know about the enter from the back of the bus thing. I didn't know that existed until like earlier today.
It's very confronting to see it, isn't it? Particularly when Ryan and Rosa, who we both care about, are being charged at the front of the bus and then they have to get off and board on the back. And she tries to use logic and says, well, how am I supposed to get on the back when everyone's standing in the stairwell? To me, I just went, it's such a small thing, but you go, they're treating people so poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I found the quote from Rosa. So this is directly from her. People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I was not tired physically or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in.
Right. So again, kind of reinforcing, or dispelling some of the stories that have been crafted around this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people probably remember her being awarded, I think it's a Congressional Medal.
Mm-hmm.
And she was elderly then. I think she lived till her 90s. From memory, Now I'm just going off Argy's memory, which we know isn't terrific, but from memory she was about 92 when she got awarded that medal. Congressional Medal's the highest honour you can get in the US, is that right?
The highest civilian honour you can get in the US. There are higher military honours, but those can't be given to civilians.
High civilian, yeah.
So
Yeah, so good on her.
So we get that little establishing scene in the episode, and then we skip ahead 12 years to the beginning, the event, the Rosa Parks event.
I'm kind of impressed James Blake.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm impressed James Blake drove the same bus line for 12 years. Like, I know that's a real thing that happened, but it's still like I'm in a weird way impressed he drove the same bus line for 12 bloody years. But anyway.
But fellas, back in the day, when you had a job, you're in that job for life.
Clearly,
it's only a fairly new phenomenon that these days you might have 4 or 5 different jobs, even over 10 years. It's a very new phenomenon. So my parents. I mean, I was a little bit like this, but my parents were even more. Once you started, for example, teaching at a school, you were there for life.
Well, so, that's nice job security if somebody.
Yeah, sucks if you get bored or tired of the job or just hate it. But yeah, security there.
Well, I've had, I'd say, 4 different types of jobs in my life, and I've stuck in the same industry for only 15 years. But that's unusual. My husband's been in his job now, I think, for 15 years, and before that, he was in another one for 15 years, just with the one company. So yeah, that's because he's a lazy bugger. No, just kidding. So yeah, red T-shirt. Now, when I did my Doctor Who cosplay this year at PAX, which stands for Penny Arcade Expo. I did the Doctor last year because she was just new. I did her this year, but I updated her a bit. So I actually got this T-shirt. I had this one, I had the classic, and later on she wears another different coloured T-shirt. So I had all 3 of them going on. And she is so good to cosplay because she's got that many pockets. And if you wear her bum bag as well, which she wears a bit later, I think you call it a fanny pack, but for us the fanny is the sexy bit, so we don't tend to call it that. If you've got that as well, you've just got so much space to put things, which is often really hard when you're cosplaying. But yeah, so the jacket has pockets, the pants have pockets, and the different coloured shirt was great. I don't think they've thought the shirt through very well, though, because it's too big. Like the scoop on it's too big. So they've got to put that stupid Spencer underneath it.
As a man who knows nothing about fashion, I'm just nodding my head like, yeah.
Well, if you watch the episode again, just have a look at just think about how the shirt on her would look without that Spencer, and it would look really quite silly.
Don't really even know what a Spencer is.
Oh, Sloppy Joe, the white long sleeve thing she's wearing underneath it.
Oh, okay,
or
okay.
Long sleeve T-shirt. It's not quite though.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anything's better than question mark vest.
Whoa. Hey now. Let's not get too radical.
What did he say?
I said anything's better than question mark vest.
Oh, yeah, well, that is. He's putting it out there, isn't it?
Looks like you're the odd one out now, Keon.
I would receive more support.
No.
Yeah, I kind of like the question mark vest.
Yeah, me too.
So you're wrong, Keon. 2 versus 1. So yeah, we've got. So you want to talk about where we first catch up with Rosa as the Doctor Who gang?
Yeah, so they're tracing the Artron energy that seems to be in the area, and they run into Rosa Parks.
We should mention this is the Doctor's 11th attempt to get them home, so she's basically doing what the 5th Doctor did with Tegan, like, don't worry, I'll get you home eventually. You want to go back to London Heathrow, I'll get you there.
But in another sort of disconcerting scene, a guy drops something.
His wife drops her handkerchief.
Oh, is that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a glove. I thought it was a white
maybe
glove.
It was a glove. I think you're right, actually.
It's something. It's not too important what it is. And Ryan picks it up and tries to give it back to her.
Good guy, Ryan.
And the guy's just like, "What are you doing?" And he
slaps him.
Yeah, he slaps.
He doesn't even say anything. He just slaps him.
Oh.
And
really hard too.
Ryan's like, "Yo, what the hell?" Yeah, I was like, "Don't let your kind touch my stuff."
And Ryan is about to either go off on this guy or just sock him, and then Rosa Parks steps in and apologizes on his behalf in another, sort of very disconcerting moment. Another very concerning moment, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really clever because by this stage we actually do care about Ryan. We've been introduced to him through his disability, his relationship with his gran, and just stand-up kind of guy. And so we're on his side. So getting slapped like that across the face, I don't know about you, but when I was watching it, I felt like I'd just been whacked emotionally. I was like, what the hell is, what is that? Like, my brain didn't even know where to go.
Well, they play it up a lot because they go slow-mo and you see the spittle flying off his face, and they really play it up.
Yeah, and I'd say it's even a surprise. I mean, I kind of knew going into this episode that there would be something like that, especially, with Ryan and Yaz, like, not being white. But I was surprised by it, how abrupt it was, and how it was just straight off the bat, just here it is. The first, interaction they get with anyone in this time period, in this place, is this.
And they do another nice historical shout out. I really recommend that people go and Google lynching of Emmett Till. It's a fascinating case, and it's also sickening. So basically, he was a 14-year-old African American who was lynched in Mississippi. He was shot and thrown off a bridge, and no one is 100% sure about what happened. There was some idea that he whistled in a shop where there were a lot of white children that he was playing with, and one of them was female. And did he whistle at her in an inappropriate way or not? And some people said that he had a stammer and that his mother had taught him to whistle just before he spoke, because that helped him to overcome his stammer. So there's a lot of back and forth about what had actually occurred. But the important part of the story is no matter what he did, it did not make shooting and throwing a 14-year-old off a bridge okay. The other thing I would encourage you to do is if you go to the Wikipedia page for him, it's got his mother asked for him to have an open casket. He was from Chicago, which was the other problem. He was from up north, and they said all these northerners don't know their place. But the mother asked for the casket to be open because his face he'd been pistol whipped, so his face was all beaten and broken, and he'd been obviously in the water for quite some time. So the person who came across him, he was extremely disfigured. His face was all bloated from the water, and, you could see, as I said, all the pistol whip on his faces. So it's quite a shocking image. It's not too sickening, so, you can look at it even if you don't like horror. But just to look at a picture of him as a young man, which they have, and then the picture of him after that was done to him, speaks volumes about what was seen as acceptable by some people at this time. So this was scary. So, Rosa was trying to say to Ryan, this is scary, Ryan. Be very, very careful what you're doing, because you could end up like this bloke.
Right. And I just want to say, I've seen the picture you're talking about, and I saw it a few years ago, and I can still picture it in my mind. I was actually very, sickened by it. I can still see it years later, if that says anything. Yeah, it's bad, in my opinion. Really bad.
Yeah. But I would still encourage people to even have a look, because sometimes we need to see that so that we don't want to go back to this.
Right.
Ever again. But yeah. And I think that's clever too. Again, they're putting this very much in historical context. And once again, the writing of this is just so good because of that.
Definitely. I totally agree with that. And that's something I really appreciated about this episode, was the attention paid there, and the historicity of it, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. But they go to a restaurant/bar. And there's another sort of
I hope people know I'm laughing because of something that goes on between Ryan and Yaz, not anything else. I'm just going to say it. Yeah. So they're saying to Ryan, you know who Rosa is? And he goes, yeah, the bus woman. First black woman to ever drive a bus. And then Yaz goes, no, Ryan.
Yeah,
I just love it. It's like, you know, because probably if you were British, you wouldn't have paid as much attention to who Rosa Parks was.
yeah, and
I just love Yaz's, no, Ryan. She just sounds exasperated.
Well, I was questioning, like, before I even started the episode, I was like, does the average British person, like, even know who Rosa Parks is/was?
All right. I can hit you with some knowledge here because I remember when this episode aired, and I follow a lot of British people on Twitter, obviously, and I follow a lot of Doctor Who news sites who retweet British people. Anyway, I remember when this episode came out that a lot of people actually had a problem with Ryan's line there, or at least this is what I remember, because they were like, all of us in Britain do learn who Rosa Parks is. Like, we know who Rosa Parks is. Like, I don't think that anybody in Britain would have that kind of reaction because pretty much all of us learned who Rosa Parks was in school, even if it wasn't necessarily important to the history of our country. It was important, you know, it was an important event in the history of the world kind of thing.
Because Ryan just wasn't paying attention.
I think that is supposed to be the implication here, because Yaz is like, we were literally in a classroom named after Rosa Parks, and then Graham's like, you were in a classroom named after Rosa Parks and you don't know who he is? Ryan, what?
No, Ryan. Look, I'm going to say that, you know, people my age definitely know who Rosa Parks is. But so something interesting happens with generations underneath you. There's a man called, well, he's dead now, but there was a man called Ivan Milat in Australia, and he was known as one of our most sickening serial killers. But there was also a young man named Martin Bryant, and Martin Bryant did a shooting massacre at a place called Port Arthur where he killed 35 people, and that's what actually led to us having gun control. Now, recently we were out somewhere with people our age and then people a generation underneath ours, and someone said something about Martin Bryant, and one of the younger people said, who's that? So I think there could be a segment of people who just sort of aren't as don't have a good grasp of general knowledge, or they've just not come across it. And I think it would be a younger generation who might go, oh, Rosa Parks, who's that? But, yeah, definitely not the majority of people. If you say Rosa Parks to anyone in this country, over a certain age, they know exactly who she was. So I think they're using the humour to drive through a point, because then they get to actually they're allowed to now actually say who she was, just in case you as the viewer don't actually know who she was.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my opinion pretty clearly a narrative device of, well, if you don't know who Rosa Parks is as the audience member, here we're going to explain it in the context of explaining it to Ryan.
Yes. And now you don't feel like an idiot because Ryan didn't know either.
And just in case you didn't know about the blatant racism in Montgomery, Alabama, some people come up to the table and ask them to leave.
Yeah, they call Yaz a Mexican.
Oh, it's just cringe, isn't it?
Yikes.
And Ryan here actually says a line that I believe it's attributed to Muhammad Ali, and I'm pretty sure it's like 100% confirmed also that he's said this. So I almost don't even want to say it, but I'm going to, because it's a direct quote from the episode. The waitress, I think it is, says, "We don't serve Negroes here," and Ryan says, "Well, good, because I don't eat them."
Yes.
Which just makes them even more
classic.
mad. and I believe
it says it's Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, interesting there.
Interesting.
He actually orders a cup of coffee and hot dog. Waitress says, "We don't serve." I'm just going to say N-word. And Ali says, "I don't eat them either. Just give me a cup of coffee and a hamburger."
And that's interesting because Ali was, connected. He knew Malcolm X. He was connected to the Black Muslim community before, I guess, Malcolm X's falling out with that.
And he said it in 1960, so it actually is attributed to him as a direct quote. There you go. Nice.
But they leave.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, yeah. No, so they leave. Ryan is like, "I hate this place." And the doctor actually tells Ryan and Yaz, like, it's going to be hard, like, you two being here. Like, this is going to keep happening. So if you just want to, like, nope out right now, feel free. But they decide to stay. They're like, if people live with this every day of their lives, we can put up with it for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
I also do like the thing that becomes an ongoing joke for this season. They walk out of the pub without having ordered anything, and Graham says, "Have you noticed that happens a lot? I need regular food, that's all." And he's right. Like, when did they ever stop and have a nosh on Doctor Who?
It's okay. They've got the TARDIS food machine for all their needs.
Flashback to like the first.
They've got a biscuit dispenser. Make use of it.
Well, the first Doctor's like 3 or 4 stories. They go one right into the other. Like, no time for rest, no time for food.
Yes. And it's always the Doctor's nuke for how many years, but yet all the regenerations we see only seem to last for a couple. Although I know that they do travel between episodes. So,
well, the 11th Doctor lasts for hundreds of years on Trenzalore, so, I mean, you're kind of skewing the average there a little bit upwards.
12 lasted like, a billion years.
I really like the costumes in this episode too. I think Rosa looks really refined and elegant. And Carrasco looks kind of suave and cool and, James Deanish and menacing. I thought they were just really nicely handled.
Yeah, Carrasco's
got a cool leather jacket on. Yeah.
Carrasco, I wanted to also mention, his design is good because right away, as soon as you see him, something's wrong. He's out of place. He doesn't belong in 1955 just because of the way he looks.
Yep. Dead on. But you're not quite sure where he's from either.
No, I thought he was an alien for most of this. But it turns out he's just a racist guy from the future.
We find out he's from the 79th century, and they actually meet him, like, right now.
Because he snoops.
While they're at the restaurant, because he snoops around the TARDIS a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
He tries to shoot it, and he's like, force field. Interesting.
But
so one of the criticisms made of this season so far is that the baddies aren't bad enough.
I don't know. Space racism is pretty bad.
Yeah, this guy seems pretty damn bad.
I liked the first guy. His name, Zim Shah. I liked him with the teeth in his face. I thought he was good. And he was killing people, so that's good. They didn't really like the sheets in the Ghost Monument. They didn't like those. They didn't like the robots either. And then they didn't feel that this guy was really bad. And I think they're missing the point. I think the thing with Carrasco is he's not physically bad and he doesn't try to manipulate things physically, but he uses his mental abilities to affect some of the baddest change you could possibly have, which is to make the civil rights movement have amounted, to not have ever occurred. So, and I find the way that he subtly tries to do everything really interesting. So it's not that they're battling so much actual racism, but they're battling a guy who's trying to advance racism versus them trying to stop the racism. And I found that really quite fascinating. It drew me in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't agree whatsoever with the idea that he's not bad enough. Like this I mean, what you're describing is pretty dang bad in my estimation.
But do villains always have to be in saying the quote not bad enough unquote, kind of assumes there has to be a minimum bar that a villain has to cross to be considered a villain. And I disagree with that sentiment entirely.
Well, it's almost like if they don't kill anyone, they're not bad enough.
Well, that's just... There are a lot of problems with that kind of...
He can't kill anyone anyway.
In my opinion.
And they explain
exactly.
why, because he's got that limiter in his head.
Yeah, this is Gan done right. Gan, but the limiter actually works.
Well, I think I'm starting to enjoy this flashbacks in Mission to Destiny.
No, that was Deliverance.
Was it Deliverance?
Yeah.
Damn.
I don't know how I remembered that. I don't know how I remember Blake's 7-episode titles and not Doctor Who ones.
Because there's only 52 of those.
There's some really clever lines here too. Don't kill the vibe, Graham.
Yeah.
And I love it when the Doctor says to Carrasco, now you're being annoying. And the best one is, don't threaten me. Oh, tell you what, Jodie Whittaker delivers that beautifully.
Yeah, I love the 13th Doctor already dialogue-wise. And I know this is a little preemptive, but she's shaping up to be one of my favorite doctors.
It is very preemptive. We have not even had her entire run air yet.
I already like her. Like, I'm already more on board with her than I was with, some other doctors in their early days.
It's
like
true.
Pertwee.
The 12th Doctor you were sold on like 2 episodes in. You were like, I like the grumpy old man more than any other Doctor.
Well, that's how it should be. It should be the current Doctor's your favourite, really, shouldn't it, in some ways?
In some ways.
Yeah, I like her Doctor. I think her Doctor, someone I heard describe her as scrappy, which I thought was a very good explanation. And she sort of flies by the seat of her pants a lot. But, yeah, she's very sort of, I wouldn't say flippant, but she doesn't take things too seriously. And she involves her friends, or however you want to title her companions. She involves them a lot more, I think. So in this episode in particular, there's one brilliant little section where Graham has to go and do something with the bus drivers. Ryan goes to an NAACP meeting. Yaz goes and does research to get the Rosas timeline sorted out, and the Doctor goes and does something else. And I really liked that because it wasn't the Doctor traipsing around with all the companions following her saying, and explain why this happens now, Doctor, and what do we do? It was actually them doing things. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was going to mention this at the start of the episode. One of the biggest strengths of this episode is that, unlike a lot of other episodes this season, everybody, including Yaz, gets something to do this episode. So.
Yaz is written really well in this, and I've noticed that they're saying, I'm trying not to give too much away because I don't want to skew Kian's, interaction with things, but they are talking about in season 12 that they're going to try to work a bit more on Yaz's character. I think they got it right here. I totally know who Yaz is here. She's got some great lines, like when she says good times and then thumbs up for riding the bus. So I think you get to know who she is. You get to see her interact with Rosa as well. You get a really good sense of her, and you got a really good sense of her in the first episode. But after this, unfortunately, they don't keep up with that. Yeah.
We get Demons of the Punjab.
Was that sorry? Oh, yeah, but if you watch that again, think about how much of Yaz you actually learn about. You don't actually learn a lot about her. You learn a lot about her theoretically, but you don't actually get to see her interaction with a lot of things.
Well, we'll be watching it again soon enough, so...
Yeah, I shouldn't say anything about that.
The next episode, I think Arachnids...
Sorry, go ahead.
Which episode is next?
I think it's Arachnids in the UK. It seems to revolve around Yaz, based on the preview that I watched.
It is Arachnids in the UK.
But, again, we'll have to see.
I'm not going to talk about it at this stage. Yeah. But as I was saying, I really like the interaction between the characters as well in this episode. So the whole, you ain't Banksy, or am I? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So
now, if anyone doesn't know who Banksy is, he is an anonymous street artist who mostly used stencils. So a lot of people refuse to call him a graffiti artist because he used stencils for his art. And I'm sure that Dylan wants to talk about Girl with a Balloon or Girl with Balloon.
Do I?
Well, you did a couple of things back. It's the Sotheby's art auction for a piece of art from Banksy.
Oh, is this
Was
the
that
one
the
where
one
he
where they
shredded?
shredded?
Yeah.
Yep.
He does performance art now as well. I know we linked to this video. I don't know if it was on this podcast. It might have been on our other podcast, another little classic sci-fi podcast. Check that out. We're watching Children of the Stones. But there's a clip on YouTube from a movie called Exit Through the Gift Shop.
That was on this podcast, I believe.
Where Banksy just pulls out a box and he's like, "Here's some bills that I counterfeited," and I was just going to give them away, but I didn't. And here they are.
All right, so he had a painting called Girl with Balloon, and it was different for him because it was actually a painting, not a stencil. So Sotheby's was auctioning it, and the moment the auction finished and they hit the hammer, the thing started to shred itself. Now, in practice, the thing completely shredded itself, but there was a malfunction. So it only half shredded itself. And Banksy's representatives later said it's no longer called Girl with Balloon. It's now called Love is in the Bin. But they talked with the person who'd actually bought the painting and said, look, do you still want to go ahead with the purchase? And they said, oh, even more now because it's so famous. But it has been donated to a museum, so you can go and see it if you wish to.
Oh. Yeah, well,
and you can actually see the shredding
now?
happening
Freaking
on
bananas
YouTube.
Taped to the wall, so I don't put any stake in that anymore.
The other thing is that Sotheby's said, oh, we're involved with the only piece of art that has ever actually been developed during an auction. And it's like, yeah, try a bit harder, mate.
Wasn't that all also intentional? Like, it was supposed to get shredded, right? And they knew, the auctioneers knew about all
They said they didn't know. They said they didn't know. And I actually believed them. Because Banksy goes and actually films how he set it all up later without obviously showing his face. So it was all operated remotely. Yeah. I mean, I guess you can take that with a grain of salt, and they could just still be lying. We won't know. Yeah. I like to think that they didn't know. To me, that's cooler.
Yeah, it is cooler, but I'm a true skeptic, and I can't believe anything when there's a slightest shred of doubt. So,
Fair enough. We talked about some of this, that some of the things they do with Rosa here are accurate. So they actually have her say she didn't sit because she's tired. This was interesting because she did work in a department store as a seamstress, but then they say she doesn't work in a department store, and then later on they say she did work in a department store. I found that a little bit odd, but the point is that she did actually work in a department store as a seamstress. And I do like Graham's description of a mobile phone.
Yeah, this is a good sort of thriller scene where the cop comes in and Ryan and Yaz have to hide in the bathroom because they've broken into this motel room to kind of decide what they're going to do next.
It's interesting that Yaz goes to hide too, because a lot of this episode is like, well, where does Yaz fit on this spectrum? Because when they ride the bus later, the bus driver lets Yaz on in the front and lets her sit in the white section, even though she's very clearly not white. She just happens to be lighter skinned than Ryan.
And I think that's actually a good inclusion into the episode, because when you actually, sort of go back through American history, there's because obviously a lot of, laws in U.S. history, racist ones, have accounted for like white and black, but like then what does that mean? And, like there are people other than what have historically in the U.S. been considered either white or black.
Well, it's interesting because I remember this vaguely, there were some states or cities, I think it was, had laws that basically said, like, if you had 1/8, if one of your, what would that be? Like, if one of your great-grandparents, if one of your great-grandparents was black or African-American, basically, then you were considered African-American.
Right. There's one of my favorite books of all time is this book called Pudd'nhead Wilson. It's by Mark Twain. It's one of the last books he ever read. It's only like 100 pages. Like, you can read it very quickly, and it's great. And the premise of it is that this slave woman switches her baby and her master's baby because they look almost exactly alike. And that's sort of, you can kind of get that from there, where her baby looks like a white baby. Yeah, she's a slave. So like, what is the basis of slavery then if it's not, I think it just calls into question some of these things of like just how silly the entire system is. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's interesting here because there's a lot of myths in Australian history that people have just believed, and if you actually look them up, you find out that they're incorrect. So one is that we killed all the Indigenous people in Tasmania. And we haven't. There's still people who are Indigenous who live in Tasmania these days. Again, Tasmania is the smaller island state down the bottom of Australia. And it then comes down to this thing of, what makes you Indigenous and what makes you non-Indigenous. So some of the people who are Indigenous who are living in Tassie these days have Anglo-Saxon heritage and Indigenous heritage. And some people will say, well, you can't be Indigenous then because you're not, fully black, whatever fully black in inverted commas means. So we also have a lot of Indigenous people in Australia who have very fair-coloured skin. And what tends to make you Indigenous in Australia is if you are recognised by an Indigenous group. So it's got nothing to do with the colour of your skin and everything to do with your cultural identity. But being Indigenous in Australia is a very, 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 very different beast, I think, to some other countries. Because, it's who you associate with, not necessarily how you look. So what were we talking about? So I thought at this point having different types of doctors and companions, I think, gives us something. And what it gives us is access to different experiences as viewers. So we wouldn't have been able to get this insightful conversation between Yaz and Ryan in the past, and the very subtle information that Yaz is Muslim, which I thought was beautifully done. And then we also see the doctor let Graham take the lead with the policeman. So all these different perspectives, I often hear people saying, oh, why do we have to have gay people? Why do we have to have, people of colour? Why do we have to have women? Well, the reason is because it gives us more variety with our stories. So we have male doctors and we can see what male doctors have been like. Now we've got something new, which we were getting a little bit with Missy. It's just women are often treated differently in the world, and now we have a doctor being treated differently from a doctor before. And we have two people of colour being able to have a very honest, open discussion about, are things actually any better for us these days? What are our challenges that we're still facing, which I think is just so refreshing.
Yeah, I think her being a woman it puts her through a lot of different things she hasn't been before. One of my favorite moments / quotes this season is in the Witchfinders when she gets captured, and not to go too in depth, she basically just goes like, this would be so much easier if I was still a man, or something like that. And just like calling attention to the fact that like everything this season she's had to face all these, not all of them, but a lot of these situations, especially here in Montgomery, Alabama, where she like defers to Graham because not only is it still a very racist society, it is like partially still a very sexist society. And she like recognizes that. Puts
his arm around her, and she's like, "What?"
She's like, "I guess I'm going along with this because I don't want the cop to like come back with an army and arrest us or anything."
Right, and it's very obvious that she would have had a better trick up her sleeve than what Graham says, which is that he talks about the smartphone without using the word smartphone and calls himself Steve Jobs.
Yes, and the guy says, sounds ridiculous. And I thought, well, yeah, it actually does sound quite ridiculous, doesn't it? It's a calendar, and it takes photos.
And it sends letters, all without requiring stamps.
Oh, brilliant. And I'm going to go back to Yaz. I think she's so well written. Again, as we could feel ourselves being slapped when Ryan got slapped, it's actually quite terrifying when Yaz goes to sit in the bus and she says, guess I'll park myself in the white section. Let's see what happens. How frightened would you be?
I have no baseline for her experience, so I don't know if I can say.
But you can empathise and you can go, because people often say, oh, I can't talk about that. So, people often say, oh, I can't talk about female issues because I'm not female. Yeah, but you know what? You can listen when people like me talk about what it's like to be female. You can empathise and you can put yourself in my position. I don't think that you can't do any of that. I could imagine how scary it might be to park myself in a bus not knowing whether I was going to get, smacked around for being in the wrong section.
I guess I can empathize and be like, yeah, okay, that, it sounds very difficult and that it is really shitty, but I don't know if I can, like you say, put yourself in our situation. Like, I don't know if I can because I haven't experienced that kind of, I haven't experienced that. I haven't experienced any of this. So, like, systematic sexism or systematic racism is like, I can look at it and be like, yeah, that's dumb and we shouldn't do that. And I can take steps to eliminate it whenever it appears, whether it be in myself or in anybody else. But can I put myself in the shoes where I have been the subject of a racist comment? Not really.
So you don't think you can even think that it might be terrifying to be
I mean,
in that
I can
position?
think it would be terrifying, but I mean, your question was like, how terrified would you be? And I'm saying like, I don't
sorry,
know how terrified I would be. Like, would I be
Sorry, that's just
terrified?
to do with-
Yes.
Sorry, that's just to do with the way of wording it. So I don't know if this happens in America, but if you say, how good would that be? It's like you're saying, would that be good?
Yeah.
So when
So
I'm saying,
rhetorical.
how terrified would you be? I'm not actually saying, give me a quantify how terrified you'd be. I'm saying, wouldn't that be terrifying?
Oh, yeah. Well, then I can agree. Yeah, it would be terrifying. I guess my point was, I don't know if I can sit here and tell you how terrified I would be because I just don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah,
I
I think that's just wording. So we will often say, oh, how good was that, mate? Or, yeah, oh, how rough are you? Or, like we'll just say how, blah, 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 blah. Just Aussiness.
I've experienced the same thing with South Africanisms because sometimes we say like, instead of would you like me to come pick you up, what we do in South Africa, sometimes we go, must I come pick you up? Which like, in America, that sounds very harsh. Must I come pick you up? But like in South Africa, we'd just be like, oh yeah. Like that means like, would you like me to come pick you up? Like, must I come pick you up? Like,
Must I come pick you up?
well,
wow, that's really interesting. I'm going to start using that now. Yes, everybody else. Sorry, go.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say regarding Yaz in this scene, I can totally and maybe this has something to do with empathizing, or maybe it's just kind of what would you call it? Not empathizing, but just knowing.
Sympathize?
Like I can no. Like I can totally see
Understand.
why there. I guess understand. Yeah, a lot of black people in the States wanted to either did or go to Europe, emigrate to Europe if they could or wanted to, or Africa, because there wasn't necessarily that obviously there's racism in Europe and stuff, but like there was not necessarily the threat of violence that there was here. Not necessarily.
well, there's an interesting, during this time period, and I don't remember who it was, but someone had this idea, it's like maybe all of us African-Americans / black people should just go back to Africa.
Yeah, W.B. Du Bois was a big proponent of back to Africa.
W.B. Du Bois was a big, like you said, but then like that started its own conversation where it was like, but if we went back, would we even be able to fit in? Like, we're so far removed from our ancestors who came from Africa that, like, are we even African anymore? Most of them would say, no, we're American, and we should have as much of a right to this country as everybody else.
Yeah. And I'd have to go back to Scotland, and it's too f***ing cold there, so I'm not doing it. So my ancestors came out 6 generations ago to Australia, and they were given what was called a grant of land then by Governor Macquarie. So basically he just took a whole lot of land that Indigenous people were living on and said, here you go, this is yours now. And, Scotland's a pretty cold place. And I always imagine that my ancestors got here in winter to Australia, which is very mild. And they went, oh, it's lovely out here. Never going back to Scotland. And then summer hit and they went, oh, my God, what is this burning? When the f*** can we get out of here? So I've sworn a couple of times. You probably can't use any of that now. But, I always have this imaginary conversation that they were like, oh, this is lovely. And then summer hits and they were like, because we've got big fires at the moment. The sky's full of smoke every single day. It's quite bad at the moment.
About some of that online.
I was starting to get really worried at this point about what the writers might do, that they might muck everything up. I was so worried that they might have the doctor give Rosa a big inspiring speech, or that they were going to have Graham drive the bus, or that something was going to go wrong. I was getting really, really nervous about it. But I needn't have been, because they handled it extremely well, I think.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to kind of what you were touching on before with with Carrasco. He's the one trying to mess everything up, but the doctor and Ryan Yaz Graham are the ones trying to keep everything in place or put everything back in place or make sure history plays out as it's supposed to.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is one of my favorite historical-based episodes, because unlike pretty much all the other ones, this episode, the core conflict is that the Doctor and co. must preserve history. Like their actions in this episode are towards the goal of preserving history as it was, rather than bettering it or changing it.
Or the first Doctor like looking at Rome like, oh, I guess we lit that fire, haha, or whatever it was.
Well, that's like, yeah, that's one of the things where their actions were to change history. They just changed it into the history as we know it, I guess. Or like in the Aztecs, where the Doctor's just like, we just can't change anything. And then they just kind of watch as these people get sacrificed to the gods, and then they leave. And they're like, what? Whereas, and there's a lot of historical episodes where the Doctor comes in and he changes history, puts it on the course that we know it now. But in this episode, the Doctor, she has to keep it as it is. She has to, and her friends have to take specific actions in order to keep history as it is. And that includes doing something that none of them are really comfortable with, but that they have to do in order for history to play out as it must.
Right.
Yeah, and Rosa's spirit comes through too. Without the integrity of the woman, you can do all this stuff as much as you like, try not to change history, but unless Rosa is Rosa, it's not going to work. But Rosa is Rosa.
And thank God for that. Well, we should explain this whole kind of sequence of events, because Carrasco kind of is like jumping ahead of them to try stop this, Rosa's remaining seated from happening. And as it happens, the Doctor and the group are trying to catch up and undo everything Carrasco's doing.
Right. So they all sort of go off and they all have their own sort of task, I guess, as we kind of mentioned before. And the most interesting one of these was Ryan sort of tailing Rosa, but then he confronts her, and they go to this meeting, and he meets, Martin Luther King Jr. That was the most interesting one for me, I guess, probably because of the historical aspects. And I do think this is one of the strongest historicals Doctor Who's ever done. Although maybe that's the immediacy of it, both like as an American and it was only 70 years ago. Maybe that has something to do with it. But Ryan is like, he's shocked. He's like, oh my God, it's Martin Luther King Jr. And he's like, you know me?
He's like, yeah, I've been, my nan, like, she's a big fan of you. And they're like, does your nan come to the church? She died recently.
There's many more atheists in UK than US. So odds are. It's, I got a thrill too, Keon, when it was, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and then Rosa Parks, in the next breath, or it was the other way around actually. I got chills down my spine with that too. And he was actually active in the NAACP in Montgomery, so they're not mucking around with things there. They're not shoving him somewhere where he wouldn't be found, which is really good.
Right.
I must. I've got a small gripe here. I don't like the way Tosin Cole delivers the line. Whoa! To me, it just feels like he's. It's too laboured. It's not sort of. For me, it doesn't feel like it just comes out and he's actually thrilled.
You don't like his Owen Wilson
That might have
impression?
been the director. I don't know.
Whoa!
It's a really minor point. It's just every time I see him deliver it, I go, oh, no. Yeah. But
okay.
I'm a bit like that with some of Tosin's stuff. I think he gets better as the series goes on. But I think early on he's a little bit rough like here.
I get that, though, of like getting hung up on the smallest thing and that kind of just being the thing that you can't get past. Not necessarily in this situation for me, at least, but like I get that.
I can empathize because there's a line that we haven't hit yet, but later in the season that I remember Jodie Whittaker just delivering it and me being like, damn, that felt really forced. Like, that did not come naturally to her at all. And I think that's more a product of the writing of that episode rather than Jodie Whittaker's skills as an actress. But, like, just when that line came out, like, that, I just got hung up on that line for the next, 10 minutes of the episode. It's like, damn, I really wish that line had been different. But anyway.
And at the end of the day, you have to say, who's to blame for that? Well, guess who makes decisions about when we're going to move on and tape the next line? That's the director, not the actors. So really, the director was okay with Tosin's reading here and obviously Jodie's reading later, but they have to accept blame if we as the audience think it wasn't quite right.
Yeah, but at some point also there's maybe not enough budget for them to do another take and they're kind of forced by outside or maybe the sun's going down, or like they've only got one day left on set, and they're like, damn, we really got to film like 3 scenes today, so you know, whatever we can get, we can take. You know, there might be mitigating circumstances as well.
Sure. I'm still going to blame them. I do like this bit. We've got the Doctor interacting with Carrasco again, and I love the thing where she shoots the equipment with her Doctor and with her Sonic, and goes, "Oops, shame." I thought that was really cute.
I like
Some
this.
people feel that this Doctor uses her Sonic too much. I say she doesn't use it enough. I want to see more Sonic.
That is a controversial opinion. I would just say she doesn't use it any more than any of the other Doctors have, except like, especially the reboot ones, or the 12, I think, was like the least egregious about it.
Yeah, 11 just had it in his hand 24/7.
Yeah, the 11 wielded it like a weapon in every episode.
All the time. Yeah, actually, now you mention 11, I think he brought his out almost every episode, didn't he?
Well, every time he wanted to look tough, he pulled it out of his pocket and pointed it at someone, and they were like, okay.
My memory of it was that he just was holding it almost in every single moment of every single scene. He just had it in his hand. That's my memory. Maybe I'm incorrect.
And flapping it around all the time, because you know how it had those little prongs that would open up on the top of it? He was always flapping it around so they were opening and shutting.
Yeah, the most stark contrast in Sonic usage is between him and the 12th Doctor.
You reminded me you were in the Day of the Doctor when 10 and 11 are both pointing their sonic screwdrivers, and the War Doctor goes, "Why are you pointing your screwdrivers at those people?"
Yeah, 10 was.
It was like they were guns, and he was almost like, "Well, you may as well be pointing water pistols at them." So sorry, Dylan, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say the most stark contrast is, like, because you mentioned the prongs, and that reminded me how, like, immediately in deep breath, the 12th Doctor, like, doesn't even extend the prongs anymore. Like, he just points it, uses it, and puts it away. Very utilitarian use of the exact same Sonic.
Right. Yeah, he hangs on to that Sonic for a bit, actually, 11. No, 12.
No, 12 goes through 3 different Sonics, because the 11th Doctor's one gets destroyed at the end of 12's first season. I don't remember how. And then he's got the Sonic Shades for a season, and then he's got the new one the TARDIS spits out when Clara bites the dust.
And he still uses the shades after that as well.
Yeah, but you know what? I realized it's probably a good thing he's got a backup, given how many times the Sonic just gets, like, randomly destroyed.
You know, I didn't like this Doctor's Sonic to start with, but as with most things with her, it has grown on me, and I particularly like the fact that she made her own Sonic. That was very unusual.
I do enjoy that, but it is... Do you not think it's a little weirdly phallic shaped? Is that just me?
They all are. They're just looking at them.
I don't know. It'd have to have a pretty weird shaped one, I think, to look like that. I'll tell you something though. When you so I've got one as part of my cosplay costume, and when you use that thing, it fits really nicely in the hand.
I would say it looks more comfortable for the hand than the other ones, though.
Yeah,
it reminds me of
it's really cool from that perspective.
It reminds me of Count Dooku's lightsaber, which is also curved.
Yeah.
And the other nice thing about it is that it's yellow light, which they haven't done before, I don't think. So it's always been red, blue, green, that kind of thing. But the yellow in the silver looks magnificent.
Well,
it's easier on the eyes, a little more natural than the blue light.
I was going to say the old ones didn't even have a light.
Because they were actually screwdrivers.
Yeah, well, Tom Baker's doesn't have a light. It's just got a red bit of metal on it. Listen, I as a cosplayer again, when she ripped the jacket, I was like, don't rip the jacket.
Oh, I was like, hell yeah, rip the jacket, because then you get a cool story.
Yeah, but the jacket's the most expensive part of the outfit. It's like, no, not the jacket.
But then you get a cool story. It was fixed by Rosa Parks. You're like, yes, cool story.
Yeah, I know, but just as it was happening, I was like, oh no, of all the things.
It's Time Lord technology. She probably walked into the TARDIS and you couldn't tell it was ever ripped ever again.
I mean, they bought that jacket for her, didn't they? In The Woman Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah, I'm surprised Yaz wasn't like, no, my money!
Well, Yaz was kind of like, from memory, that's what you're going with? And the Doctor says, yep.
Well, we should mention why they're doing this, is that they need to get Rosa on the bus at the exact time. So they're just staying by her at her, I guess, sort of workstation. And the excuse that they have for that is that the doctor has ripped her jacket and they need her to fix it.
And she's British, and because she's British, she's got to get the jacket, done ASAP, and she's got to have someone watch it being done.
Yeah, they use their Britishness to their advantage a lot in this episode. Of they kind of take advantage of people and be like, well, we British people do things like this, and they don't know any better, I guess.
But they buy it.
Yeah. And so what also gets bought here is that Ryan and Graham go visit Blake because he has actually decided to take the day off and fish at the river.
His route was reassigned.
Right. To Elias Griffin, who the doctor and Yaz convince has won a free trip to Vegas. But they go out to the river. This was actually funny.
Before they got to the river, I just want to ask a question, because maybe you guys can explain this to me, but I was not sure of the significance of changing the bus driver. Like, I didn't understand how that specifically affected whether Rosa Parks decided to stay seated or not. I feel like that kind of action was maybe independent of the bus driver.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the reason that they did that was just because they knew historically that she got on the same bus with Blake, as she did in 1943, and they were just trying to reenact that,
It's for two reasons. So one is it's the butterfly effect. We don't know what changing one little thing would do to the story. So we don't want to muck around with anything. We've got to, keep it as tightly, as it was supposed to be. But the second one is because we know that bus driver is going to actually take some action, because he has in the past. So he's driven off and left her there and made her go around the back. So we know that if she's in that seat and he has to move that sign back, he will say something, whereas another bus driver might go, nah, just can't be bothered. That's what it was to me.
My head justification was that this new bus driver was not as much of a raging racist as Blake.
And he might not have been. And, that might have been the thing, that he would, as I said, he'd just go, no, can't be bothered. So it's a late night, let us sit there. Because, actually, I did look this up, the demarcation wasn't as – okay, so – the law was that black people could sit in the back of the bus, and I'm sorry for using black as a descriptor then. People of colour were to sit in the back of the bus, white people were to sit in the front of the bus, and then there were these two rows of seats in the middle, and those were a little bit more up for grabs. But the idea was supposed to be that you couldn't just keep moving the sign and say white people can sit and people of colour can't. The idea was when it got to a certain point, you were supposed to stop doing it. But the Montgomery bus drivers had a meeting and they decided that no, that wasn't how they were going to do things. They were just going to keep moving the sign back. And they worked with the police department, and the police department said, yep, you can do that, and we're going to treat it as though you have the powers of a police officer, so you can enforce that kind of thing going on. So that was a little bit of background to what was occurring. So another bus driver might have gone, well, look, really, there's supposed to be some leeway, and I'm not supposed to keep moving it back, and I'm not going to bother tonight. That I could see that could happen.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did not know any of that. Yeah, I knew it was sort of
it was kind of a thing that
moving,
Montgomery, the bus drivers had figured out amongst themselves.
Huh. Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely.
But, I mean, I'm not sure how much they went into it, or even that's what they were thinking. I think, as we've said, generally, just having a different bus driver, you don't know what he would have done.
Right. But it works. Ryan and Graham are able to convince him that there are, what did they say? There's riots.
Yeah, it was going to be like a sit-in.
Right, that's what they say.
No, and he was like, not on my bus, there isn't.
But how good is Graham and Ryan fishing with this bloke? And he just cannot wrap his head around the fact that Ryan is Graham's grandson.
Yeah, he's like, screw this. Yeah. This is too illogical for me. I'm out. Except it's not really illogical. It's interesting. There's a lot of plays on what's quote logical and unquote not logical in this episode, because when Rosa uses the logic of well, why would I get out of the bus and come back on, especially when they're standing on the stairway, so I won't be able to get on the bus, and that that's like logical. Like they're blocking the door. Why can't I just walk down the bus? And also like it's shorter, but it kind of calls into, it kind of brings to the forefront the illogic of this racist kind of belief that the bus driver holds, that like, no, because you're black, you must go outside, you must go up the other door, and you must, shove your way through them if you have to, basically. And here again, there's kind of this, they're like, well, there's going to be a sit-in, and he's kind of bringing to the forefront this illogic where he's like, not on my bus, like on my bus we follow the rules, and the rules are like not really logical because they're based in this racist kind of belief system, but he's like, no sit-in on my bus. So that's what I wanted to say.
It's very much this idea that white people are doing people who aren't white a favour.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting on our buses, so we'll tell you how to get on, and if you don't like it, then go off and do your own thing.
Yeah.
Which ironically is what happened. People of colour did go off and do their own thing, and the bus company ran out of money, and then they had to change. Really clever.
Yeah, no, I think this episode is really clever for a lot of reasons, and that being one of them.
I like this conversation between Yaz and Rosa. It's getting us to like Rosa even a little bit more.
Which one is this? Remind me.
When Rosa's working on the jacket.
Okay.
And her and Yaz are having a conversation. And I think now I didn't write down the specifics, but I believe she's asking her about, what it's like to live in Montgomery at this time, and doesn't it, get her frustrated dealing with all the racism. That's bad of me. I should have put a little I should have said what they were talking about. Everyone will just have to go back and watch the episode again. And then I just had a note, Ryan is annoying me in this episode. I know what this was about. This was about him running up and saying to the elderly couple, the buses are coming, and they like get stuffed and walk off. I just felt like, well, you're not going to get them to stay by yelling at them, are you, Ryan? So just calm down, boy.
Well, they mainly walk off because he's colored, a person of color. Yeah. So,
and sorry, I must apologise. I just remembered as it came out of my mouth. So using the word boy in Australia is not the same as using it in the US. It's not derogatory.
I kind of sort of thing ticked in my brain of like, okay, that's getting cut out.
Okay, so there was a very famous episode here where Muhammad Ali came out to one of our award ceremonies, and he was talking to a guy called Bert Newton, who's an old Australian celebrity. And Bert said, I like the boy. Now, again, in Australia, you'll just use boy in exchange for lad. But people immediately, Muhammad Ali said, what did you just say? And people in the audience started shouting out, he said Roy, because we didn't realise that was a racist term. So, my apologies. I've let my language slip in there. Sincere apologies for that, people.
Just differences in local vernacular, really.
Yeah, something that this episode is definitely dealing with, of like, these people, obviously our four main characters, thrown into this situation too, and they kind of don't know the context that they're in, and they're obviously in the right, but still they have to deal with that, and more importantly, they have to think about how people in that situation have to deal with that for their entire lives, because they get to leave at the end, but the people living there don't.
Right.
According to witnesses and Parks herself, they actually get the wording for what she said on the bus correct.
Right. Yeah, they actually they got it verbatim. I think. No, I was just going to say I think they did it verbatim, or at least the line that is for sure verbatim is when she says, "You may do that."
Mm-hmm.
How strong is that?
And that's in response to Blake saying something along the lines of like, "I'm gonna have to call the police and arrest you."
Yeah, it's the most polite way to say "up yours."
So I've got what they said. I wrote it down. Blake said, "Why don't you stand up?" And Parks said, "I don't think I should have to stand up." And Blake said, "Well, if you don't stand up, I'm going to have to call the police and have you arrested." And Parks says, "You may do that." And Vanette Robinson delivered that line. Oh, getting chills just thinking about it now.
And one thing I also want to point out here is I think they actually even got the other passengers correct, because I was doing a little homework, and I read that, like, you know, the two passengers opposite Parks, when Blake asked, and this is historical, when Blake asked them to all move back, the two opposite did it immediately, and then apparently the guy sitting next to Parks kind of hesitated a bit, stood up, and then went back, and they portray that in the episode where the other two get up immediately, and the guy sitting next to her waits a little bit. So they're
and the other thing they got accurate
details,
was that she then scooched over to the window seat where he had been sitting.
Right. So I was very impressed by the attention paid here.
It's fiction, though.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
It's based on historical fact, but yeah, it is an interpretation.
I don't know.
Sorry, go.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I always find it interesting when people praise things for their historical accuracy, when it's a fictional thing and they obviously didn't do everything correct. So what's the point in praising the one thing they did get correct when this is very clearly this history viewed through a lens? I mean, yeah, it's nice that they get the words verbatim and it's like a cool historical connection and it's cool, but I don't think that has any bearing on like the quality of the episode, in my opinion. I should say.
No, I share that opinion. I'm just impressed by what they did. You know,
fair.
Does that kind of make sense?
Why does it matter to me? It matters to me because I think, again, coming from an historical background, and I just said an historical, which I hate people saying. Coming from a historical background, I like to see that they're basing some of their stuff in truth. So if they had Blake say, "Why don't you stand up, you dirty, disgusting woman?" And she says, "No, you are dirty and disgusting in your soul." So, like, to me, that would be over-dramatising it. So the fact that they're actually taking words that were said and putting it in this setting quite simplistically makes me think, okay, this isn't what actually happened, but it could have been. It could have been what happened. And yeah, the other thing that Parks said later, which I also thought was important, is she said when they asked her to move to the rear of the bus, she thought about Emmett Till, and she said, "I just couldn't go back there." So Emmett Till was an important thing to bring up earlier. So I think all these little threads that they're weaving in just make a more complex tapestry. So you've got a little bit of reality. You've got a little bit of, well, imagining what if this happened, what if that happened. And I think when they all come together, it just makes a richer thing that you're watching. But that's me. And everyone obviously approaches differently.
And one sort of...
I wasn't... Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. I'm done with it.
All right, sure. And I think one sort of fictional element that we haven't explained yet is that it's actually Graham who is the instigator for all this in a way, because they've filled up the bus. There are enough white people sitting in front that Blake is gonna have to ask Rosa and the three other passengers to move, and Graham's like, "Sweet, like let's get off here. Like we've done our work. We can get off. We're done." He gets up. A white woman comes and takes his seat. And now we realize, like, okay, he's the one. It's him. Him being on the bus is what makes Blake go back there and do what he did.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to.
No, yeah.
He's like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, I don't want to... Because in a way, he has to almost... And that's what I was referencing earlier when I said the Doctor and Co have to do something they feel uncomfortable with in order to preserve the course of history, because he almost has to, not directly, but indirectly... approve of the system,
right,
in order to bring about the change that does occur, in order to, I guess, push Rosa to stay in the seat, which then in turn causes the change to occur. And he's like, well, I don't want to do this, because I think he realizes that by doing this he has to play into this system and not directly but indirectly like be racist.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how it also brings up the idea that these systems that disadvantage some people can also actually disadvantage the people they're advantaging. So if you don't want to be a racist bastard and you just want to have a seat on a bus in Montgomery, but there's people of colour sitting where you would like to sit, you've either... I bet if you stood up, the bus driver would come down anyway and tell them to move on. So you wouldn't even have a chance to say, well, I don't want to be racist.
Yeah,
I think
that's something I was thinking about. Like, if Graham just went, well, no, I'm okay with standing. Like, even if the bus driver didn't then go back to, chastise Rosa or whatever, like, still, like, the person who stands up and is just like, no, I'll just stand, is like, they're basically going to be ostracized from the community for the rest of their life because we're like, what, you sympathize with them? Like, I don't know if I can associate myself with you anymore.
And as all this is going on, we sort of get a vocal song. A vocal song starts playing.
I'm just gonna hang on. So we keep notes on a shared Google Doc, and I just want to read Keon's live notes that he took while his vocal song was. Okay, so his note 36, Graham just ruined everything, and then 37, oh shit. 38, no, not a vocal song, no, and then 39, this is such a good episode, no, they're ruining it. So
yeah, I wasn't sure about Rise Up initially. I was the same. I was like, oh no, don't turn this into a millennial, sing song. We've had the gravity of the situation, but you know what? On extra viewings, I was on board. I thought, no, I get it, because it's letting us enjoy the moment, and it's adding something just a little bit extra to underline the significance of what we're watching.
In hindsight, I think I agree. Obviously, I haven't watched it again, but in hindsight, I think I'm more okay with it because it does end on this bleak moment. Yet the song maybe sort of highlights that change, however slight, is to come, type thing.
I had the opposite experience. The first time I watched it, I was like, no problems. I was like, oh, it makes sense. The second time I watched it, I just got this feeling that it was a little too bombastic too early. Because I think it makes sense for the Doctor's whole monologue. We should Rosa Parks starts this whole movement. She gets the Congressional Medal of Freedom or Honor, and like I think it works for that. But like they start playing it while she's getting arrested, and to me, I feel like that scene would have been more impactful without that song. I feel like it starts too early. It needed to align better with the Doctor's. Because it's a very like uplifting, optimistic song, and I think that works very well for the Doctor's optimistic, uplifting monologue, but played over like this very emotionally heavy, pessimistic scene where at this moment she's getting arrested. To me, there's like a clash of viewpoints, but it's not enough to really like taint my view of the episode. So
my question with that is always, imagine the scene without that music, and what would have been the impact? I think, what would we have actually been hearing? Because nothing was being said. It was just Rosa being arrested, taken off the bus. I think it would have felt very less momentous.
Well,
I'm not saying I'm definitely right, but yeah, I think, imagine what else would have been happening in the soundscape at that time.
I want to bring this up because there's a scene in the Spike Lee movie Do the Right Thing where a character is asked to turn off his boombox by like the only white-owned business in an entirely black neighborhood. And finally, at the end of the movie, I'm going to spoil it, so if you don't want to have it spoiled, just hit that like 15 seconds ahead thing. He, at the end of the movie, finally refuses. He's like, no, I'm not going to turn off my boombox. And then the scene where he gets killed for not turning off the boombox, there's no music at all throughout that. And it's a long scene. It's, I think, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but it's him getting like strangled, so it feels even longer. And the difference between like, and the boombox cuts out. Somebody, I think, turns it off or something. And you get that entire sequence with no music, and it's just people, it's the sounds of him getting killed and people like yelling stop and stuff like that. So, and I was reminded of this scene watching this episode, and I was like, man, what could this have been without the music?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, I would always feel like it would be more impactful if there was no music just for that part where she's getting arrested, and we just like see concerned shots of the Doctor and Graham, and then contrast that with the like completely unconcerned faces of the rest of the busgoers, and then we see her get arrested like almost in total silence, and then cut to the Doctor explaining very optimistically, like, yeah, that was a sad moment we just witnessed, but here's all the good that comes from it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Do you think the exposition in the TARDIS works or doesn't work?
I think it works right up until the asteroid.
Yeah, that was a little out of left field to me. I don't know. It's maybe did you feel the same? Like, I just felt it was odd to have the asteroid at the end. Like, her name extends beyond the Earth. It's actually also there's an asteroid named after her.
Yeah, we've all. I was the same way. I was like, you had me, then you lost me. She changed the universe. What? Because we named an asteroid after her.
And in a way, that's like a colonial thing as well. It's like naming this thing that doesn't really like have anything to do with us or belong to us or is older than us, probably.
But not only that, has nothing to do with Rosa Parks herself. Like the reason to me why the asteroid feels out of left field is because it's not directly influenced by her. It was like probably a group of white men who named the asteroid as like a pat on the back, like, yeah, we named an asteroid after Rosa Parks. Probably, look at us. Because that's not like they pulled the asteroid out of their backside for this episode. It's a real asteroid, and like, so I can say with some confidence that it probably was a group of, if not white men, white people naming it like, yeah, look at us go, Rosa Parks. And like, she didn't have anything to do with this asteroid. She didn't discover this asteroid. She didn't see this asteroid in her lifetime, probably. I don't know.
I mean, how much more exciting would it have been had they named one of the robots that was on Mars Rosa? Because then, that would be, again, Rosa pushing boundaries and advancing and, giving humanity new information. Something like that, you would have gone, oh, yeah, that's cool. But just calling an asteroid in space Rosa, I didn't even know there was an asteroid called Rosa until that.
It's a dead lifeless
and I agree
rock.
with you. I think it was a big anticlimax.
Yeah, I definitely feel that the end of this is a bit of a letdown despite the strength of the rest of it. Just the asteroid, the music, just kind of the overall sort of package of the end of this episode. I
don't have a problem with the Doctor explaining that the Montgomery bus boycott was really important. I think that's nice.
I agree.
Yeah, and I just on a little note, I do really like how when we go inside the TARDIS these days, the front of the TARDIS is actually like the outside of the TARDIS. Like, it's that complete 3D. Yeah, you can see out the side windows and everything. Mm-hmm. I just like that.
Oh, man, I saw this. Sorry, on that topic.
I like everything, but yeah.
Sorry, this is a tangent, but I don't know if there's ever going to be another opportunity to mention this, but I saw this crazy theory someone came up with that in the classic show, when you're in the TARDIS, the doors are like, they're not the police doors, and that there's this like spatial disconnect between the doors of the TARDIS and the outside doors, and there's like this kind of space between them. And then, so the theory that this guy came up with is during the Time War, the TARDIS got damaged, and that's why the exterior doors of the TARDIS are also the interior doors of the TARDIS, that they're the same. But now the TARDIS is healing and repairing itself and slowly generating that space between the TARDIS doors and the exterior doors again, and that's why there's like the three sides now with the 13th Doctor to the TARDIS door area. I don't know. Sorry for interrupting. I feel bad about that, but I feel like there was no other time I could bring up this theory I saw.
I buy it.
I think that's good timing.
So, anyway, sorry. Continue with what you were saying. I've got some
overall thoughts on this episode. if any people want to move on or not. Do you want to say anything else, Keon?
No, I mean, I have a few things, but totally go ahead.
All right, so I just had a few little notes. To me, the production values of this season have been raised up a notch. I feel that everything's got a bit more of a filmic quality to it, except for something later, which we won't talk about now. I thought the episode to me was put together really well. Beautiful writing, fantastically acted. It has humour, it had pathos. Again, as I said earlier, excellent pacing. All characters got their moment in the sun, which was a hard feat, given that we've not only got the three friends and the Doctor and the baddie, and we also had to get to know Rosa, and we also got introduced to Martin Luther King Jr., and we got told about Emmett Till. So there was a lot of information to pack in. I thought the costumes were very beautiful, particularly, again, Rosa's costume, just so sort of graceful and, very powerful, sort of quiet power I found in that costume. And I thought the architecture was lovely too. Again, the whites only sign at the motel, and the outside of the pub was very evocative of Alabama. So to me, I know I often say when I'm on this, this is in my top 10. Well, that's because I only ever asked to do the episodes that are in my top 10. This one, to me, I think I would put this my third favourite episode of New Who. And probably I'd say it's in my top 5 of all time Doctor Who episodes. I think it's that good.
I agree. It's up there on my lists as well. This is one of my favorites of New Who. Probably top 5, probably top 10 of Doctor Who.
It's in my top 50.
Top 50?
I don't know. I like it, but there are a lot. I can think of a lot of other episodes that I like more. You know, that's
Right.
not to say it's a bad episode. I can just, for me, think of a lot of other episodes I like more.
You like that one you like Love and Monsters the best, don't you?
Oh yeah, that's the one.
Massacre, Love and Monsters, Fear
Yeah, my
Her.
top 5. It goes Massacre, Love and Monsters, Fear Her, and then Arachnids in the UK. That's a joke that only Argy would get.
Yeah, I don't get the arachnids in the UK.
I didn't actually hate it either.
And the inside of the TARDIS grew on me as well. A lot of things with season 11 grew on me. So I didn't like the inside of the TARDIS to start with, but now I'm on board. I like when it takes off how sort of the fingers are moving in it. And, again, they've got the colours that reflect the colour of the Sonic. And also the yellow little thing at the end of the Solic is very much reflected on little bits and pieces on the TARDIS console. Mm-hmm. So I think they've done a good job. They've done a little minor change for the TARDIS next season that we're about to get. I won't say what it is. It's very small. But, nice to see that they're constantly looking at how they can improve it.
Now, I was going to say, I wasn't super sold on the console room until I saw the picture of what the console room looks like in Series 12, and it is very similar, but the few minor changes they make basically took it from me from just being all right to being great.
Wow.
I love the little spinning TARDIS on it, and I love the fact that it's got the hourglass, and the best part about it is the biscuit dispenser. Custard creams all day.
Well, I'm going to say this. One of the changes I do like that it seems like they're making for Series 12, and this isn't a spoiler, is that they do brighten the TARDIS. Because that was one of my complaints about this season, is that the TARDIS set seems very dark. And,
right, yeah, I can see that.
And that always bummed me out because there was always so much detail in this TARDIS set that I could never see because the TARDIS set was so bloody dark every episode. This episode, I think, is like the exception, because the Doctor's got that whole monologue. But I think most of the scenes we see the TARDIS the rest of the season, there's not a lot of time in the TARDIS, and it's very darkly lit. But hey.
Yeah, it's not as lived in, I don't think, the TARDIS in Series 11 as it has been in other series. You think about Clara and the Doctor and how much time they spent talking in the TARDIS in the past, particularly Capaldi.
Well, it is one of the things I like that Chibnall changed, is that now we get very few scenes in the TARDIS, and some people might disagree, but I think that's to the show's benefit because it gets us into the plot quicker and spends less time meandering, sitting in the TARDIS talking for 10 minutes like, what are we going to do, guys? The Doctor and Clara talk for 10 minutes before the actual episode starts, and then you only get like 25 minutes of actual plot because then they spend 10 minutes in the TARDIS at the end of the episode.
Yeah, actually, I didn't think about it like that way. I'll have to think about that. I think it could be right.
I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but just think back to the Capaldi-Clara era, and a lot of those episodes start with, let's say, 5 to 6 minutes.
You're not exaggerating that much.
5 to 10 minutes at the start of the episode where they're either in Clara's house or they go into the TARDIS and they have witty banter for 10 minutes, which, we always love witty banter between the Doctor and the Companion,
Did we?
You did.
Yeah, I did. I did, yeah.
But that takes away time from what could be plots, so I don't know.
They're going to have to do a lot to beat this, I think, in this Series 11.
Well, there are episodes that
I'm not going to say whether I think they do or not, but yeah.
there are some episodes that I think that I like better personally, but not everybody agrees with me.
I've for the first time been reading some Doctor Who quote unquote spoilery news, or I've been looking at some of the episode summaries that they've been releasing, and they seem pretty good. They seem pretty solid.
I think there's more good episodes to come. A lot of people have really been quite down on this series. I think a little bit unfairly. Some of the stuff they've said I agree with.
I think a lot of it is unfair. I think in true Trust Your Doctor fashion, we're going to come out here and like a lot of these episodes, and you know what? Haters be damned.
You know, there was an episode when I first watched it, I went, that was absolute rubbish. And now, when I go back and watch it, it's one of my favourite episodes.
Is it the one with the frog?
And that
Please
hasn't
say
happened
it's the
to
one
me
with
with the Doctor Who stuff in a long time.
Keon wants to know if it's the one with the frog.
One other thing you will notice with this season of Doctor Who is that it has an extremely diverse cast, which as I said, I really liked in this episode. We got the opportunity to hear two people of colour actually speak about what it's like in this modern day and age. So because we've got a more diverse cast, we get more of those kind of different things happening, and I think that enriches the story.
Mm-hmm. And I think it provides an opportunity for a lot newer, in the sense that we haven't heard them before, stories to be told. You know, something like Demons of the Punjab would not work if you didn't have like a diverse cast.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what that's about. So
you'll find out,
so I
sir.
can't confirm or deny, I guess.
I have to think, but Demons of the Punjab might be my favorite episode of this season. So.
What's your favourite? Demons?
Demons, I think. I have to think about it, because it's been a year since I've watched these episodes, and I haven't thought about them since. So.
Not even for 1 second. Have not thought about them since.
I took a long time to rewatch Demons, and when I did, I went, yeah, this is actually quite good.
I pretty much loved it on first watch. I was like, this is like so different from all the other episodes that we've seen tackling anything remotely similar to this topic, that I just thought it was great. So,
well,
I have one minor quibble, but I will write to you about that.
Okay.
Of the three we've watched so far, this is far and away my favorite. It's the only one of the first 3 episodes of this season that I don't consider just mediocre. Consider it far greater than mediocre. I
thought you considered Woman Who Fell to Earth quite good.
Yeah, well, I guess looking back, my opinion has changed. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't on board with the action sequence. And I remember saying, you know, I really like the companions and the friends, the fam, and the potential there and the dynamic between them. Not the potential, because I liked them in that episode, but I also liked the potential of where this could all go.
I loved The Woman Who Fell to Earth. I thought it was absolutely spectacular. And I really liked the fact that Jodie Whittaker had to actually do that jump.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Danger.
Cool.
Yes. I mean, obviously she had harnesses and everything, but she did still have to do it. She did have to do the grab as well. But, I thought it was a really good intro to a new Doctor. It reminded me of The 11th Hour in that, it introduced everybody. So you could have come in there and never have watched Doctor Who in the past and you'd get it.
Right. And I think that was kind of the point, because I think Chibnall knew that a lot of people were going to come into the show with the whole, this is the first female Doctor thing.
Right.
So.
Or come back to the show, perhaps, after a long time.
Hey, they did Venusian Aikido last week, didn't they? I forgot to write about it.
They did.
Yes. Remember I said in one of the other episodes, look out for the Venusian Aikido again? Yeah.
Well, one thing we're also...
I like those little throwbacks.
One thing we're also looking out for is the Doctor name-dropping famous people, which she did quite a bit in this episode.
This is a segment I introduced last week. It's like, how many historical people has the Doctor run into, according to the 13th Doctor? And I did make a note.
That's a great idea. That's cool. Because he was wearing someone's specs. Was it Pythagoras?
Yeah, last week she wore Pythagoras. Well, she wears the sunglasses, and then she's like, it may be Pythagoras's, or it may be. Now I'm completely forgetting who else she said.
Yeah, I don't remember. But in this episode, we get she's met Elvis, perhaps Sinatra, Oh, we just get that Elvis gave the phone to Sinatra.
So she's presumably called and communicated with Sinatra.
Right. And we get that she might be Banksy.
Oh, yes. I kind of hope that she is. And that's why the thing wasn't shredded all the way. If it was Banksy, it would have been shredded all the way if it wasn't the doctor. Because she's got a heart, it only got shredded halfway.
So,
all right, well, thanks, folks. That was fun to talk about this episode again.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
And thanks for being on and working with us through the, shall we say, scheduling difficulties we had.
Yeah. Which were my fault, I should just say, on recording.
I'm not going to allow Keon to take full responsibility for this, even though he continues to try to. It was like at least 50% my fault as well. So.
And just so people know, I'm not deliberately talking over these fellows either. We do have a delay. So sometimes it sounds like I'm just going, it's all about me, shush you, but it's because I can't hear them.
Well, not only that, like I was thinking about this after the last episode we did together that Keon and I typically don't talk over each other as much as or conflict sentences as much as we do with you. And I think part of that is because we're in the same room and we can see when the other person is going to say something, whereas with you, we don't know if you're going to start a sentence until you say the sentence and we already heard it. So there is that as well.
Maybe we should video next time.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we could. We could try it.
Didn't even think of that.
We'll just have like some weird setup in the background that we don't normally have.
Well, I mean, we're on Skype, so we can just video Skype.
Right.
Something to think
we'll
about for
try
next
that.
time, which who knows when that'll
Which will be later this year when you get up to Series 12. Maybe.
Potentially. We're still figuring out what we're doing with Series 12.
We don't even know. We're like 2 weeks away from Series 12, Episode 1. We don't even know.
Yeah, because
Luckily-
are you going to do it week by week as it goes, or interesting?
Luckily, I actually get BBC America,
So
I can
do I.
so I can just record the episodes.
Nice.
Lucky there.
Well, we're going to
for
figure
me.
that out
Because it's
soon.
actually kind of difficult to watch Doctor Who legitimately in the U.S.
Well,
Surprisingly,
it's specifically Series 11 because you have to purchase it on Amazon. It's not part of Prime streaming, so...
yeah. So you either do it there, which Doctor Who is actually leaving Amazon Prime, so don't do it there because you won't have it soon. So it's either that or you buy the DVD. That's the only legitimate legal ways to get it in the U.S. right now.
I'm just so excited that we're getting Doctor Who Year's Day again. I love Who Year's Day as opposed to Christmas. I was over all the Christmas stories.
Yeah, it's a little played
And
out.
it looks like it's going to be a cracker too.
I mean,
Sorry,
the
I
name
should-
is literally
I should-
Spyfall, so pastiching
Sorry, I
Skyfall.
should explain too that cracker in Australia doesn't mean what it does in the US.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just like a cracking good story. This is the problem, isn't it? As I'm saying words, I'm thinking, oh no. that
Especially
means
in the
something
context of
different.
this episode specifically.
I know. Oh dear. I must apologise to people. I'm not. I sound like I'm being. Anyway, it's just Australia. It's just Aussies, right? It's Aussies. Get used to it, right, mate? Get used to it.
Yeah.
Syntactical
It's fine.
differences.
All right, I'm done.
I think
As
I'm
am
done
I.
as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being on, Argy.
Thank you.
And joining
Pleasure.
us again. It's always fun to have you on. And I always look forward to talking with you and seeing your perspective on the show. Yeah, so anyway, if there's anyone out there who'd like to email us, like Argy does, I want to say most weeks, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Rosa, the 13th Doctor. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, all at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And, thanks again, Argy.
Yeah, thank you.
Next time,
No worries.
we'll be watching Arachnids in the UK. But until then, the end.